So, good evening. And before I begin my talk, I thought it would be nice if we could all just sit quietly for a few minutes to bring our minds to a more calm and peaceful state, and also a more positive state. So just sit comfortably, but it's good if you can keep your back straight. That helps the mind be more clear and focused. And just let your body relax. Let all the muscles in your body relax. And let your breath flow naturally. And let your mind relax. You may have in your mind thoughts left over from things that happened to you today, things at work, conversations you had, experiences you had. Just put those aside for now. Just let go of all thoughts of the past, today and any time in the past. And also let go of any thoughts you may have of the future, what you're going to do after the talk tonight or any time in the future. And just let your mind rest in the present, being right here, right now. And to make the most of our time together tonight, bring into your mind the thought or the wish that you will learn something here tonight that will be helpful for you, to help your mind grow in loving kindness, compassion, wisdom, and other positive and spiritual qualities. And also on top of that, if you can have the wish that you will learn something here tonight that will be helpful to others, so that in your interactions with other people, both people you're already close to in your life and people you just meet, that you will be more helpful for them, more able to bring them peace and happiness and other spiritual qualities, and less likely to do things that will be hurtful or cause problems to others. So try to have that wish in your mind as we begin this session tonight. Okay, so the subject for the talk tonight is balancing the spiritual and the material. And I will talk for a while on this subject, just sharing with you some thoughts that I have about it. And then I'll leave time at the end, because I'm sure some of you have questions, practical questions from your own life and experience that you'd like to ask, and I'll do my best to answer them. So with regard to this subject of balancing the spiritual and the material, there are two main things that come to my mind. One is the idea of the middle way, which is a Buddhist idea, how to achieve the middle way. And the other thought I have is how we can bring more spirituality into our life, how we can have more spiritual practice, spiritual experience in our life, in this modern world, material world. So those are the two things I'll be talking about. For the first one, the idea of the middle way. I don't know if all of you are familiar with Buddhism and Buddhist ideas, but the idea of the middle way was introduced by the Buddha, and it's based on his own experience in his life. In the earlier part of his life, he lived very comfortably. He was born into a wealthy and royal family, and in his own words, as he said, he was spoiled and pampered. So his life was comfortable, and his father and family did everything they could to provide him with whatever was needed and whatever was desired for his happiness. But at a certain point, he made the decision to walk out on that situation. He left his comfortable home and his loving family, including a very beautiful wife and small child, and he walked out on his inheritance, being the heir to the throne of this kingdom, which his father was the ruler of. He walked out on all of that, and it wasn't because he was irresponsible, like he was an irresponsible husband and father. It wasn't because of that. He loved his family very deeply. He cared about them very, very deeply. The reason he walked out was because he realized that the life that he had been living with his family was not very meaningful. It was a life dedicated to amassing and enjoying wealth and pleasure. And he realized that all this wealth and pleasure was transitory. It wasn't going to last. And that himself and his parents, his wife, his child, his family, everybody would eventually get older and older, succumb to sickness, and eventually die. So everything would come to an end. So having that realization, he was no longer interested in enjoying just the things of this life, things of this world. And instead, he had this very strong wish to find a way to end it, to be free of both the sufferings, the problems, the pains of life, as well as to get beyond the sort of dreamlike transitory pleasures of this life. And he had this wish not just for himself, not just for his own self-gain, but because he loved his family, he loved people so much. He wanted to help them to do it as well. He wanted to find a way whereby everybody could be free from problems and suffering and the transitory nature of life and all experiences. So he left, and then he spent the next 6 years living quite a different lifestyle. He became a homeless person by choice. He went from being a prince to being a homeless person. And he just lived outside, out in the forest, under the trees, and put up with whatever difficulties that meant. The heat, the incredible, intense heat of India, as well as the cold. Some of you might think, oh, India's a warm country, it never gets cold there, but it does. I know, I spent the last 2 winters in Bodh Gaya, which is the place where the Buddha attained enlightenment, and it does get very cold there. In fact, there are certain nights when it gets down to 0 Celsius, freezing. Some people, homeless people, don't make it through the night. So anyway, it can get very cold there. But he just lived outside under the trees, no shelter, and not even much in the way of clothing to keep him warm. Not like a down jacket, nice warm sleeping bag. And put up with insects, zillions of mosquitoes and flies and other kinds of poisonous insects and wild animals and so on. And he put up with hunger. He didn't eat much. He was doing ascetic practices. And fatigue and weakness. And it got to the point where he became so weak from hunger and not really taking care of his body that he nearly died. And he realized that this way that he'd been living was not getting him to the goal he wanted to achieve. So he decided to eat more nourishing food and take more care of his health. And that gave him renewed strength, mental strength, with which he was able to penetrate in his meditation and come to the direct realization of truth or reality, seeing things as they are, which enabled him to attain the goal that he was looking for, which was enlightenment. And in case some of you are not so familiar with the meaning of enlightenment, just in brief, what enlightenment means is it's a state of mind in which all the negative aspects of the mind have been completely cleared away, so they don't exist anymore. And when we say negative aspects of the mind, we're talking about certain types of thoughts or attitudes or emotions which disturb the mind, make the mind unpeaceful, and can also lead to other kinds of negativity, like behavior, negative behavior. So a good example is anger or hatred. That's probably the most negative aspect of the mind. It disturbs the mind, and it leads to activity or behavior that disturbs other people as well. It becomes quite destructive and harmful. So there's a number of these negative aspects of the mind which cause problems. They're the cause of problems and suffering and pain. And so in an enlightened mind, all these negative aspects of the mind have been completely cleared away. They don't exist, they don't arise, they're gone, they're finished. And on the other hand, there are positive aspects of the mind which are things which bring about peace and happiness and benefit both for yourself, the person who has them, as well as for others. For example, loving kindness, the attitude of caring about others, wishing them happiness, and doing whatever you can to bring them happiness. And so in an enlightened mind, these positive qualities or positive aspects of the mind have been fully developed, fully perfected to their highest degree. So, for example, with loving kindness, there's the ability to feel that, to feel pure and unconditional loving kindness for everybody, for all people, all beings, all of the time, not just some of the time. So it's like perfect loving kindness. So that's another aspect of enlightened mind, or the meaning of enlightenment. It's all good qualities, positive qualities have been fully developed. So this is what the Buddha attained, and that's why we call him the Buddha, because the Buddha means one who has awakened or one who has become enlightened. And so this was the goal he was searching for. It enabled him to free himself from the sufferings of life and the whole cycle of death and rebirth, and from all the negative or disturbing aspects of the mind. And but in his first teaching, after he attained enlightenment, he talked about the importance of a middle way in terms of one's spiritual practice or spiritual path, which means not too soft and not too hard. And as I say, the earlier part of his life, he lived a very comfortable life, had the best of everything, wealth, pleasure, and then he went to the other extreme of living this very harsh, deprived, ascetic life. And he realized that neither of those two lifestyles, neither of those two ways of life is correct and is the right way to go in terms of the spiritual path and reaching one's goal in the spiritual path. And instead, one should find a middle way, which is between those two extremes. But then the question is, well, what is the middle way? How do we find the middle way? And as far as I know, the Buddha didn't give specifics about that. He left it up to us. So my feeling is that it's up to each person, each individual who wants to follow a spiritual path, to figure out for themselves what is the middle way for them. Because like even in the case of the Buddha, even after he attained enlightenment, he attained his goal, he continued to live a homeless life. He spent most of his life living outside under the trees. Only later some gifts of land were given to him and buildings were built, very simple buildings. But most of the time he just stayed outside and wandered around, and all he had was the robes that he wore and a bowl in which he collected alms for his sustenance. And that's the way most of his followers lived. So that was his middle way. But for us, I mean, for most of us, it would be very difficult to live like that. Even most Buddhist monks and nuns, as far as I know, in the world, don't live like that. We live in monasteries or houses or apartments and have, beds and blankets and nice food. So there's only some nowadays, for example, in Southeast Asia, some Buddhist monks and nuns or other practitioners who live in that way, who really live the homeless, wandering life with just what they can carry with them, living out under the trees and so on. So I think the middle way is something each of us has to discover for ourselves, probably through a series of trials and errors, trying out different things, which is what happens with many of us when we take up the spiritual path. Sometimes at the beginning we may go to the extreme of being too hard on ourselves, giving away too much of our things, and trying to live a very simple life. And that may be okay in the beginning, but after a while we find that it isn't quite what we're looking for. And then we go to the other extreme of getting into money and buying things, and after a while realize we've gotten so caught up in these things that we don't have enough time to practice. So it's something we have to find on our own, depending on our own mind and our own needs. And everybody's different. That's something we have to realize, that we're all different. And it wouldn't be right for us to look at other people and how they're living and how they're practicing and think, well, that's what I should be doing. Because if we did try to live in the way that others are living, we may not find it suitable for us. So we have to be in touch with our own heart and our own feelings and our own needs, and find a way that will work for us, where we're not being too soft or too comfortable or getting too caught up in material things and work and relationships and so on, that we've got no time, no space in our mind or in our life for doing meditation or prayer or whatever other spiritual practice that is suitable for you. But on the other hand, going to the other extreme of depriving ourselves to the extent that we're unhappy, we're depressed, we have no joy in our life, and no joy to give to other people, no joy in our practice. So we have to find that middle way, the balance, in which we have enough that we're comfortable and happy, and there's joy in our life, and joy that we can give to others, but not going too far so that we get caught up in the more material things of this life and this world. So I think that a big issue in this finding of the middle way has to do with attachment, because it's not so much a question of what you have or how much you have or what kind of lifestyle you're living, but more a question of your state of mind, your attitude, how you relate to the things you own and the place you live and the people you're relating to and so on. So for example, I heard that one Lama was giving a teaching in Hong Kong, and one of the students coming asked the Lama about his Rolls Royce, and if it was okay for him to continue owning a Rolls Royce if he was on the spiritual path. And the Lama said, well, it depends. Are you driving the Rolls Royce, or is the Rolls Royce driving you? So it depends on our attitude and our relationship with the material things in our life and with the relationships that we have with people. It's possible that one person could have many things, a lot of wealth and a very comfortable life and a lot of relationships, and not have a lot of attachment to those things. But on the other hand, there could be another person who has very little things, material things, but a lot of attachment to those things. So even if you have a very simple lifestyle, it doesn't mean you're free of attachment. A friend of mine told me she saw a painting in a gallery somewhere in Southeast Asia, and it was a painting of a monk's hut. They call it a kuti in Thailand, I believe. It's just a very simple little hut in the forest. And inside the hut was just a sleeping mat on the floor and a mosquito net and the bowl that the monks used to collect alms and some robes folded up. So just a few simple things that a monk is allowed to have. And the title of the painting was Attachment. So even if you have just the most basic things in life, it's still possible to have attachment to those things. So the real issue, I think, about finding that balance, finding that middle way, is working with attachment. So I want to talk about that because attachment is something which I think is largely misunderstood in the West, and I think some people don't really understand what attachment is, and they confuse it with other things. For example, love. Some people think that love and attachment are the same thing, and if we talk about giving up attachment or reducing attachment, then they think, does that mean I can't have relationships? Does that mean I can't love people? So we need to understand that attachment is different from love, and I'll explain that. And other people might think that attachment is something that is necessary for happiness, for joy, and that if we give up attachment, that means we give up happiness and joy. So again, that's not correct. So in Buddhism, attachment is defined as a mental factor, so it's a factor or aspect of the mind. And what it does is it focuses on an object that it regards as attractive. Now when we say object here, the object could be a human being, a person, or an animal, a pet, but it could also be an inanimate object, like a piece of jewelry, or your money, or your stocks, or your house. And it could also be things like qualities, intelligence, or beauty, ideas, beliefs. So there's lots of different things which could be the objects of attachment. Almost anything could become an object of attachment. So there's some kind of object there, and what attachment does, it will focus on the object and regard it as attractive, as pleasant, desirable. And then what it does is it goes on to exaggerate the good qualities or the attractiveness of the object. Yeah? So it builds it up into something which is even more attractive than it really is. And it can also sometimes project things, add things that aren't even there. You know that one? Sort of wishful thinking, like you want the object to be a certain way, and maybe it isn't, but you make it up in your mind that it is like that, so you project things onto it. It also has the tendency to ignore or deny aspects of the object which aren't so attractive. Like you don't want to see certain things about the object. You don't want to know about that. So you just focus on the good things and overlook, ignore, deny the not so good things. Yeah? So it tends to paint an unrealistic, exaggerated picture of the object. And then, there's more. It goes on to regard the object as a source of happiness. Yeah, this object makes me happy. It brings me happiness. Then you go on to think, I want the object. I want to own it, to possess it, to keep it around me as much as possible, and not be separate from it. So that's kind of a long definition. I'm elaborating on it. But anyway, that's the explanation of attachment. It focuses on an object which it sees as attractive, exaggerates the good qualities, the attractiveness of the object, regards the object as a source of happiness, and then wants to keep the object and not separate from it. So that's an explanation of attachment. So let's just look at it, at what happens sometimes when we go shopping. You go to a big department store or a shopping mall, just walk down the street. What's in San Francisco? Is there a street that's like the shopping street where everybody goes, like Fifth Avenue in New York? Union Square. Okay, anyway, there are these places where people like to go shopping. There's lots of beautiful things available. So if you go to a place like that and something catches your eye, catches your mind, I should say. It's not the eye, it's the mind. And it might not even be something you're looking for, you need, but it just looks nice, you know. And then what can happen is you might walk on, but then you come back again. And look at it more carefully. If you can, you know, pick it up and turn it around, look at different aspects of it, and your mind starts working, thinking, I would look nice in this. This would look nice in me, or this would be really useful for me if I had it in my home, or, you know, I could get a lot of pleasure out of this. So this is what's going on in the mind. The mind is kind of honing in on, focusing on this object and kind of thinking about it, analyzing it, finding more and more good things about it. Maybe adding good things that may not be there, you know. And starting to think, yeah, I'd like this. This would make me happy. This would give me a lot of pleasure. And then pretty soon you get to the point, well, sometimes what happens is we look at the price tag. Oh, no, too much. Then you walk away. But then you haven't really left behind the object. You know, you're still carrying it in your mind, still thinking about it, still working at it, imagining how nice it would be. So you might come back to it the same day, the same shopping trip, or maybe another day. You go home and you're still thinking about that thing, and then you decide, yeah, it's a lot of money, but I get my paycheck next week, or I haven't really spent that much money for clothes lately, so I think it's, yeah. So you decide. So that's the point where you decide, I want it, I want to keep it, I want to own it, I want to keep it with me, I don't want to separate from it. So that's attachment. And a similar thing can happen with people, other human beings. Yeah? You ever notice this? Some person catches your eye, or wow. And then your eyes go back again and again, looking at more details. And if you watch what happens in your mind starts thinking, analyzing this person and focusing on the good qualities, the nice qualities of the person. And maybe if you have a chance to talk to the person, to actually get into a conversation and find out more about this person, name and where they come from and what they do and what they like and what they don't like and so on, then you're getting more information in which to build up this image of this person as being somebody attractive, somebody appealing, somebody that would be a source of happiness for me. And then eventually it gets to the point where there's this desire to want the object. Now in the case of people, of course, we can't buy them, but there are other ways to get close to keep the person around us as much as possible. To get exchange phone numbers, email addresses, you know, start meeting and spending more time together, and then eventually getting into a relationship. So again, as I said, attachment and love are not the same thing. Okay, so I'm talking here about loving people. I'm talking about being attached to people. So what is the difference between attachment and love? How do we differentiate them? The main difference is that Attachment is about me. Attachment is about what I want, what makes me feel good, what makes me feel happy, my pleasure, my happiness. So with attachment, you see the other person as a source of your own happiness, your own pleasure, your own good feelings, right? Which happens. I mean, the person says nice things, says certain words to you that really make you feel great, looks at you in a certain way that makes you feel fantastic, gets really happy when they see you or they hear your voice on the telephone, and gives you things and so on. So we get a lot of pleasure. But if you really think about that, what's going on there? It's the ego. The ego that's saying, yeah, this is what I want pleasure. And also I think that we have a certain image of ourselves. That's what we really mean by ego in Buddhism. It's our self-image, our sense of I, our sense of me, who I am, what I am. And it feels like something very real, very solid, concrete. According to Buddhism, that's an imaginary thing, a kind of hallucination, a creation of the mind, that sense of self that we're so attached to, we so cling to. But we don't realize that. And we really think it's there, it does exist. And naturally with the ego we have a sense of what makes us feel good and what makes us feel bad. And we're always looking out for what will make us feel good. People, things, food, music, whatever, gives us a sense of pleasure and happiness and feeling good, feeling right. So we naturally become attached to those things, those people or objects or whatever it is that give us that nice energy, nice feeling. And then whatever doesn't make us feel good or makes us feel bad, whatever gives us a sense of discomfort or displeasure, we naturally feel aversion and try to stay away from that, keep that away from us, even becoming angry or hateful towards those people or those objects. So our feelings of attachment as well as anger, aversion, hatred really arise from our ego, our own sense of self or I, which we're very attached to. That's the biggest attachment, is to our ego. So anyway, the person makes us feel good, makes our ego feel good, so naturally we want that person around as much as possible. Okay, so attachment is about me, my pleasure, my happiness, whereas love is about the other person, what makes them happy, what's good for them. In Buddhism, the definition of love, now here we're talking about the Pali or Sanskrit term is metta, and we usually translate as loving kindness. So it's not the same kind of love as in I'm in love or falling in love, that kind of thing, but it's defined as the wish for others to be happy, wishing others to have happiness, and it's very pure, it's unconditional. And so if there's love, when there's love in a relationship, we feel respect for the other person, we care about them, we want them to be happy, don't want them to be unhappy, and so we try our best to not make them unhappy and instead to make them happy, to do what will make them happy. So probably in most relationships we have, there's a combination of love and attachment. Maybe sometimes, certain moments, there may be pure love, pure unconditional love. And there's other times when there may be pure unconditional attachment. Completely just using the other person for me, for my pleasure. But most of the time, I think there's a mixture, a combination of love and attachment. And it's very hard to tell them apart. They are quite similar. And I think you have to be very mindful, very aware of your mind, and very aware of the difference between love and attachment to be able to recognize that difference and know which is which. But anyway, the point is they are different. And so working on attachment, reducing attachment, doesn't mean becoming cold and not caring about others and becoming unfeeling and like a vegetable. You can see by meeting people like His Holiness the Dalai Lama, for example, or other great Buddhist masters. They're certainly not cold and unfeeling. They're incredibly warm and alive and joyful. So they know how to have love, but without attachment. So it is possible. And the other confusion people have sometimes is about love and happiness. Attachment and happiness, thinking that if we give up attachment, we give up happiness. But is that true? Right? Is attachment really necessary in order to have happiness? If we think about our own experiences, if we just check experiences that we've had, where we've had strong attachment, strong desire for something, especially when we're young, when we're very impulsive, and as soon as we want something, we have to have it right away, and we just rush for it without thinking very carefully. So we've had plenty of experiences of that, of just rushing after objects of our desire. And what happens? Does that bring happiness? Does getting that thing you want so much bring happiness, real happiness, long-lasting happiness? Maybe some happiness for a while. But how long does it last? Before you get bored with the object, dissatisfied with it, you see something better, a better model, the newer model, something that works better, because the one you have is kind of wearing down and not working so well anymore. Right? So does attachment really bring happiness? Long-lasting, genuine happiness? If it did, then the more we have, the happier we should be. The more money we have, the more things we have, then the more happiness we should have. So is that true? Or do we end up with a lot of clutter? How many of you feel like you have more stuff than you really need? That looks like the majority. I don't have a home of my own, so I end up staying in other people's homes, and I notice that people have things like exercise equipment, which is sitting in the garage or sitting in some room in the house, and nobody ever touches it. It's covered with cloth, collecting dust. Books. So many books. I'm guilty of this too. I collect books, but then you don't have time to read. You're so busy, you don't even have time to read them, right? So following attachment. What the Buddha said about following attachment is that it's like drinking salt water. Yeah. If you're thirsty, really thirsty, and somebody hands you a glass of water, or you scoop out some water from the body of water sitting in front of you, it may initially give you some relief because it's cool and it's wet. But if there's salt in that water, then what's going to happen? You're just going to get thirstier and thirstier. It doesn't relieve your thirst, it just makes it worse. So the Buddha said it's the same with following desire, following thoughts, feelings of desire or attachment. Instead of being relieved, being satisfied, it just leads to dissatisfaction. So if we have thoughts of desire, which we all do, have thoughts of desire, follow them again and again and again, instead of ending up being satisfied, feeling, I'm okay, I have enough, everything's fine, it just leads us to being more dissatisfied, wanting more things, more unhappiness. So, what do we do about attachment? If we can see that attachment is something that isn't so good for us and doesn't really lead to happiness, is there anything we can do about it? Yes, there is. It is possible to work on attachment, to reduce attachment, and even get to the point where we're free of it. It's not something we have to be stuck with forever and ever. But of course, it's not something we can just get rid of overnight. We can't just say, okay, I'm not going to have attachment anymore, and that's it. Because it's been part of our mind for a very long time. And also, in Buddhism, they say that with other, attachment is in a category of mental factors which are called delusions, or klesha. And the general definition of a delusion is something that disturbs the mind, makes the mind disturbed and unpeaceful. So it's something we want to get rid of. Other factors in this category would be anger, jealousy, pride, and with those, it's easy to see that they disturb the mind and they're unpleasant and we want to get rid of them. We'd be much better off without them. Whereas attachment is more difficult to see it as something disturbing, something unpleasant, something to get rid of. And they say in the teachings that the other delusions are like dirt that gets on a cloth, and it's easy to clean it out. You just brush it off or scrub it with a bit of soap powder and you can get rid of it. Whereas attachment is like oil. It sinks, you know how oil sinks into the cloth and it's really hard to get out. So it is much more sticky, much more difficult to work with, difficult to get rid of. And I think part of the reason is because when we have attachment in our mind, it feels good. When we have anger in our mind, it doesn't feel very good. We want to get rid of it. But attachment feels good. When attachment arises in our mind, it has the appearance of a friend, something that's friendly, something that's good for us, something that's, it's like somebody saying, I'm here to give you a good time. I'm here to make you happy. You need me. Just trust me. But unfortunately, it's the kind of friend that is a complete cheat. What do they call that kind of person? Somebody who cheats you? Like con artist, like a con artist, yeah? Somebody who comes up to you and says, it was really nice and really friendly and says, I want to help you do this, or I want to do this for you, and you kind of go along with this person and think, you know, this person really is nice and really is helpful, and you trust the person and you end up being cheated. So attachment is like that kind of friend, a false friend, a con artist. It appears like a friend, it appears like something that's good for us, something that will make us happy. And so we usually follow it, believe in it, go along with it, but in the end we suffer, we have problems. So one of the methods we can use to work with attachment is to just come to recognize that it isn't good for us. And in fact, it's something harmful for us. It's like a poison. And we have our own experience of how we can see this. Because for one thing, when attachment comes up in our mind, as all delusions, it has the effect of disturbing the mind, making the mind disturbed and unpeaceful. So if you can see this, especially if you're a meditator, if you're someone who practices meditation and you are more sensitive, more aware of what's going on in your mind, then this is very obvious. You can see this very clearly. Attachment is like something that makes your mind turbulent and disturbed. It's like when you have a pot of water, and water by nature is cool and calm. But if you put a pot of water on top of a flame, then after a while it starts boiling. It's turbulent, boiling away. It's not cool and calm anymore. So attachment is like that. It has that kind of effect on the mind. It makes the mind very turbulent. And so that becomes very difficult when you're trying to meditate. If you've ever tried to meditate and you have some object of attachment, especially a person, that's a much stronger object of attachment than a piece of porcelain or something like that. So our mind just really chases after that object. It keeps thinking about it again and again and again, and it's very hard to concentrate on anything else. Even if you don't meditate, if you're trying to work at work, you're trying to do your work, trying to concentrate on your work, and you've just fallen in love with somebody, right? Very hard to get that person off your mind. So that's one of the effects of attachment that we can see in our experience. It causes our mind to be kind of out of control and unpeaceful and disturbed. So then if what we want is a peaceful mind, and a mind that's more calm, subdued, and we're able to work with it, we're able to control it and do what we want with it, then we can see that attachment is a hindrance to that. Another thing is attachment can lead to other problems which really are painful, really are disturbing. For example, jealousy. Jealousy is really painful, isn't it? Does anyone enjoy being jealous? Does anyone enjoy feeling jealousy? It's pretty awful, isn't it? And it doesn't really help anybody. It just makes you miserable. It doesn't really get you what you're jealous of, the other person has and you want. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get it just because you're jealous. So jealousy is very painful. Jealousy comes from attachment. If we didn't have attachment for whatever it is, the person that we think we might lose, or the other person's good looks, or money, or job, or boyfriend, or whatever it is we're jealous of, if we didn't have attachment for that, we wouldn't suffer from that painful feeling of jealousy. So attachment can lead to jealousy. It can also lead to anger. Many times when we get angry, if we analyze, why are we angry? What are we angry about? We can see there's some connection with attachment. We're attached to things happening a certain way. We're attached to people behaving towards us in a certain way, treating us in a certain way. And it doesn't happen, and we feel we have the right to get angry. And in relationships, this is where we get most of our anger. One kind of side effect of attachment is having expectations of the other person. Yeah, we have a whole set of expectations. I want you to be like that. I want you not to be like that. I want you to do this. I don't want you to do that. And we don't do this deliberately or consciously. It's something that just happens because of attachment. And often we don't even realize what our expectations are until they get destroyed. The other person doesn't live up to them. And then we get all angry and upset. Like, you weren't supposed to do that. You were supposed to do that. Why didn't you do that? But nothing had ever been exchanged verbally. It's just this stuff in our mind, these expectations. So when we have expectations of the other person, and as long as the other person lives up to our expectations, fine. But if they don't, we get angry. And we think we're right to be angry. But if you put yourself on the other end of that, how would you feel? It's probably happened. How do you feel when somebody else puts their expectations on you and then gets angry at you because you don't live up to their expectations? Is that right? Do you think it's fair to do that? Well, if it's not fair for someone to do it to us, then is it fair for us to do it to somebody else? But this is what happens. And it's because of attachment. That's part of attachment. Expecting certain things of the other person. And then that can lead to anger when they don't live up to our expectations. So that's another problem with attachment. Attachment can also lead to fear. In fact, probably always leads to fear, because it's only natural that if we have attachment to someone, to something, we don't want to lose it. We don't want to separate from it. So there's going to be this underlying fear. What if something happens? What if something happens to this person? What if they get into an accident? What if they fall in love with somebody else? What if they fall out of love with me? So there's this underlying fear that prevents us from being able to really enjoy our relationship with the other person, and our things as well. There's also that fear with our home and our money and our belongings. So these are some of the problems that we can see coming from attachment, just in the immediate sense. And there are also more problems that can come in the future due to attachment. You've probably all heard about karma. So karma has to do with our actions. We do actions and then we experience results in the future. So attachment can sometimes lead us to act unwisely, unskillfully, unethically. In other words, create bad karma. And even though the results may not show up immediately, they will show up in the future. So we'll experience problems and difficulties, bad experiences in the future as a result of attachment. And also, it's a big hindrance to spiritual growth, spiritual development. So if you're concerned about that, if you have the wish to develop your mind, develop your spiritual potential, in Buddhism we say everyone has the potential to be enlightened. We just have to work on it, develop it. But attachment is a big hindrance to that. So recognizing the disadvantages or the problems that come from attachment is one way in which we can work on attachment, because we'll come to see it as something undesirable, something we don't want to follow, we don't want to get into, we don't want to feed, and instead we want to decrease. But the number one method for working with attachment, overcoming attachment, is thinking about impermanence and death. Doesn't sound very nice, does it? It's not something we want to think about. But it's reality. And if we don't think about it, it's gonna happen one day. It's gonna come into our face one day. So we're gonna have to deal with it sooner or later. So impermanence and death simply means that everything is subject to change. Everything is changing. Our bodies are changing. Cells, atoms, tiny particles of our body are changing every moment. Our minds are changing every moment as well. So we're actually not the same person from one moment to the next. We're changing every moment, every millisecond. And everybody else is changing as well. All your loved ones, your partner, your kids, your parents, your friends. Everyone is changing every moment. Everything is changing. Your money is changing every moment. Those dollar bills are also made of little particles that are moving and changing every moment. So everything is changing. And everything will go out of existence one day. Nothing will last forever. We're not going to last forever. We're going to die one day. When we die, we have to leave it all behind. Even our body, all those cells and particles have to be left behind. Our money, our friends, our loved ones. And this is very profound. It's very simple in a way. It's truth, it's reality. It's not just a philosophical idea. It's the way things are. But we don't normally think about it. We don't normally see things in that way. But if we did, if we could really come to see, be aware of the changing nature, the impermanent nature of everything, and realize that everything is going to go out of existence one day, that will have a huge effect on our mind and our relationships with people and our relationships with things. Because we realize there's no point in being attached. How can we be attached to things which aren't going to last? Because attachment means not wanting to separate, wanting that thing to be there forever. So we're setting ourselves up for suffering by having attachment, because that thing isn't going to be there forever. That person, that beautiful person, that wonderful thing is going to be gone one day, or you're going to be gone and leave it behind. So there's inevitable separation. So realizing that, it takes time. We have to soak our mind in this idea. Think about it, be aware of it over and over again, and eventually it does help us to decrease our attachment. Okay, one more method for working with attachment is to work on cultivating spiritual happiness. Because the Buddha mentioned 4 different kinds of happiness. Everybody wants happiness, and it's not wrong to want happiness. We have the right to be happy. But the problem is we tend to get attached to and cling to a more low quality kind of happiness. So the 4 kinds of happiness that the Buddha mentioned were, first, sensory happiness or pleasure. And that's the happiness or the pleasure we get from seeing beautiful things, hearing beautiful sounds, smelling nice smells, tasting nice tastes, feeling nice sensations in our body, having nice images in our mind. So that's sensory happiness. And that kind of happiness is transitory, temporary, it doesn't last. And it's not very reliable, not stable happiness. The second kind of happiness is spiritual happiness. And that happiness comes from developing positive states of mind, like loving kindness. And this is something we can all experience. We have experienced it. When we are able to feel loving and kind and caring and compassionate, then we feel good. Not like when we're angry and irritated and all caught up in ourself and hating everybody else. So when that kind of situation is happening in our mind, we don't feel good. But when we can be loving, genuinely loving and caring, it's such a wonderful feeling, isn't it? We like to feel that way all the time. And we can. We can cultivate that feeling of love and kindness and have it more of the time. That's possible. And then we'll be happy more of the time. So anyway, this second kind of happiness, spiritual happiness, comes from cultivating and having positive states of mind, like loving kindness, compassion, faith, devotion. So that kind of happiness is more pure, more refined, more long-lasting, more reliable, more genuine. The third kind of happiness is happiness that comes from developing concentration, training our mind to have single-pointed concentration in meditation. And through that, you can experience a kind of happiness that's beyond happiness. It's bliss, physical and mental bliss, ecstasy. The fourth kind of happiness is the happiness or pleasure or bliss that comes from developing wisdom. Wisdom means seeing truth, seeing reality, cutting through all the delusions, all the mistakes of the mind, and just seeing the way things are. And that leads to the most pure, refined, blissful, wonderful kind of happiness that there is. So there's a gradation, okay? So sensory happiness, which is what we normally experience, is the lowest level of happiness. And there's much better kinds of happiness available. The problem is, if we get stuck on that lower level, and we don't give ourselves the time and opportunity to cultivate spiritual qualities, to cultivate concentration, to cultivate wisdom, we don't give ourselves a chance to experience the higher kinds of happiness. And I think one of the ways we can work on lessening our attachment is to start working on cultivating those higher kinds of happiness. Happiness that comes from developing loving kindness, from faith, from meditation. I mean, it's not something that's going to happen immediately overnight. You have to work for a while before your meditation brings that kind of fruit. But, I mean, this is my experience. I can tell you. I used to be very addicted to chocolate. Nowadays, you forget it, you know. I haven't had chocolate for a whole month now, and I'm completely happy. Because you find, you get the satisfaction you're looking for in your practice, your meditation practice. And that's a much more satisfying happiness than chocolate, or sex, or anything else. Food, music, surfing, whatever it is you're normally attracted to. So then you find your attachment to those things, your concern about those things just drops away. You don't need those things anymore. Okay, so I'm running out of time. I'm going to wrap this up. But one more thing I wanted to talk about, which ties in with what I was just talking about, is this other idea I have about what it means to balance the spiritual and the material. And that is trying to bring more spiritual practice into our life in this material world. So just a few suggestions, practical things about that. Because some people may think that in order to be a spiritual person and follow a spiritual path, you have to give up everything and become ordained, shave your head and wear robes and become a monk or nun, live in a monastery. But that's not true. There's so many things that you can do. Even, you know, you're living a very full life, family, partner, kids, job, other responsibilities. Maybe you have parents or grandparents dependent on you, social life. So even a very full, busy, normal kind of American life, there's still lots of things you can do which are spiritual things, spiritual practices. So I'll just mention a few of those, and you can ask me about more if you want to know. And these are, again, ways in which we can start to bring more spiritual happiness into our life. And that's one way in which we can lessen or decrease our attachment to the more sensory kind of level of experience. So one thing that we can do, even if we don't have a whole lot of time, is to try to have a positive motivation in our life. And one of the best ways to do this is to do something in the morning, when you first get up, or as soon as you have time in the morning. Spiritual practitioners usually try to get up a little bit earlier than normal, so they have some time to do meditation before they go off to work or school or whatever they have to do during the day. And the morning is a good time to do spiritual practice. One of the reasons is because it helps set up a good state of mind for the rest of the day. So if you can, try to have at least, doesn't have to be a long period of time, like an hour, but even 10 minutes or 5 minutes is enough. Just do some meditation or some prayer, whatever kind of spiritual practice fits you. And most important is to try to cultivate a good state of mind for the day to come. You know you're going to be doing certain things, you know you're going to be meeting certain people during the day, and try to cultivate the thought, the wish that in your meetings and interactions with these people, you will bring good feelings, good attitudes, respect, consideration, kindness, compassion. Try to at least have the wish not to hurt them, not to do anything that will be disturbing or hurtful or cause problems to other people, and instead try to do what will make them feel happy and bring them some benefit. It doesn't have to be a big thing, even smiling at them or offering them a cup of tea. Little things like that also make people happy. So just try to cultivate that kind of thought, that kind of motivation in the morning for your day. To be as beneficial as you can, be as helpful as you can, at least not to hurt people, like His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, Try to help people as much as you can. And if you can't help them, at least try not to hurt them. So let's try to have some kind of thought like that in the morning before you shoot off and do whatever you have to do during the day. And even if you don't make it the whole day, even if at 3 o'clock you blow your temper and yell at somebody, at least it's a start, and hopefully you can do better the next day or next week. Because it's something gradual. Spiritual practice is something gradual. We can't expect huge results instantly, but slowly, we keep working at it, and slowly we'll see results. I heard His Holiness the Dalai Lama say that in his experience it takes about 5 years before he sees the results of his practice. So when I heard that, I felt good, because I thought, gosh, if it takes His Holiness the Dalai Lama 5 years, if it takes me 10 years, I'd be happy. But anyway, that gives us something to go on, because sometimes people expect instant results and then they get disappointed and give up. So we have to expect it's going to take time, but if we keep working at it, slowly, we can see improvement. So that's one thing we can do. Start the day with some kind of spiritual practice, meditation, prayer, and try to at least generate some kind of good motivation to be kind, to be helpful, and at least try not to hurt anybody or cause problems during the day. And another practice from the Buddhist tradition is mindfulness. Probably many of you are familiar with that, mindfulness meditation. Mindfulness means being aware, paying attention to what's happening, especially what's happening inside of us, what's going on in our mind, and trying to be aware if there are any negative states of mind creeping up, anger, wish to hurt somebody, wish to say something nasty, do something nasty, or attachment or pride or jealousy. So these delusions, disturbing states of mind, trying to be aware of them and not let them take over our mind. Try to do something about them, stop them before they become big and take over and out of control. So being mindful during the day, that's a spiritual practice. But to be mindful during the day, I think we need to have some practice of mindfulness in a meditation situation. It's not like you can just all of a sudden be mindful if you've never meditated before. So cultivating meditation practice is very important for mindfulness. And then another very important, this is the last one. I'm getting the T sign. Another very important practice is generosity, giving. And there's different kinds of giving, different ways we can practice giving. There's 4 mentioned. One is giving material things, money, cups of tea, food, medicine, whatever is needed by somebody else, giving that. If you can, if you have the means to give, then that's one kind of giving, material giving. Another kind of giving is giving dharma, which means giving spiritual teachings or spiritual advice. So, like when we give dharma talks like this, that's one way of giving dharma. But there's other ways. You don't have to be a teacher to give dharma. Whatever you know, whatever you understand, whatever's been helpful for you, you can share that with others. But not like standing on street corners, preaching or pushing people. That's not the Buddhist way. The Buddhist way is to wait until people are interested. So when they're interested, when they show some interest, then you can share what you know with them. But do it in a skillful way. That's not going to turn them off. And use words that make sense to them. Don't use a lot of jargon, Buddhist jargon they don't understand. So translate it into terms and ideas that are relevant and meaningful and understandable to the people you're talking to. So sharing dharma. And then another kind of giving is giving love, loving kindness. And that's like I was saying before, just being respectful, being kind, being considerate, wishing others to be happy, and doing what you can to bring them happiness. So there's lots of ways we can practice that. Just smiling at people, being friendly, being kind, being considerate. There's plenty of opportunities, hundreds of opportunities we can do that during the day. There's so many people we meet. And mainly it's to do with our mind. So even if we don't have an opportunity to actually do something or say something, but as long as we have that feeling in our mind of respect, concern, care, and are looking out for ways in which we can express that or help people. So that's loving kindness, giving love. The last kind of giving is giving protection, or sometimes it's called fearlessness. And there's different ways we can practice that. If there's a person, or it doesn't have to be a person, it can be an animal or an insect that's in some kind of dangerous situation or fearful situation, and we can do something to protect them from that. Like if a child has been separated from its parents, we try to reunite them. Or an old person trying to cross the road with the cars whizzing by, and we can help them. So if somebody's in a difficult situation, they're frightened, and we can help them. And with animals also, we might sometimes find them in that kind of situation. Or insects have fallen into water, or they're walking across a path which people are walking on, and there's a danger that it gets stepped on. This is a Tibetan practice. I was very impressed when I first went to Dharamsala, and I was studying at the Tibetan library there. And one day I saw the teacher, the Geshe, he's a very high, very learned teacher, taking a walk. And at one point he stooped down and he picked up a worm, and he put it on the side, on the grass next to the path. And I was so amazed. I'd never seen anybody do anything like that before. And here is this high Lama that everybody bows to and respects, picking up a worm. It really touched me. That really moved me. So Tibetans do that, maybe Buddhists in other countries as well. But the idea is that these are beings that are in danger, and they could be killed or harmed, and we have an opportunity to save them from that. So that's a kind of giving of fearlessness or giving protection. So again, if you look out for it, there may be opportunities where you can do that during the day. So giving is a really beautiful practice, really opens your heart. It's a way of putting loving kindness and compassion into action, into practice. So, okay. So we've run out of time, but thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk, and for being so patient to listen, and for your wonderful questions and comments. So let's close by spending a few moments to make a mental dedication of whatever benefit has come out of our gathering here tonight. We started with a positive thought, the wish to learn something that will be helpful for ourselves as well as for others. And we made the effort to stay attentive and listen and learn and think about and discuss. So through all of this, we've generated some good energy or merit, positive energy, which is the cause of happiness and spiritual growth. So let's think of sharing this with others. Have the wish in your mind that whatever we've generated here tonight will be beneficial for all living beings. May it be the cause for all beings to become free of anger, hatred, intolerance, and any kind of thought wishing to give harm to anyone else, as well as ignorance, which causes us to sometimes give harm even though we don't wish to or mean to. So may all beings be free of these disturbances in their mind, and in their place, may their minds be filled with thoughts of kindness, respect, tolerance, and love and compassion, and the wish to benefit others as much as possible. And may all beings develop their potential to reach enlightenment and attain that pure blissful state as quickly as possible.